Good afternoon, everyone. At midnight, Donald Trump and Republicans shut the federal government down because they don't want to provide health care to working class Americans. Leader Schumer and myself met with President Trump and legislative leaders on Monday. We had a conversation that was designed to avoid a painful government shutdown and address the Republican health care crisis. Subsequent to that meeting, we heard nothing from any of the legislative leaders on the Republican side, and the president has been engaging in irresponsible and unserious behavior, demonstrating that all along Republicans wanted to shut the government down. That's no surprise, because for decades Republicans have consistently shut the government down as part of their efforts to try to extract and jam their extreme right-wing agenda down the throats of the American people. Democrats have repeatedly made clear we are ready to sit down with anyone at any time and at any place in order now to reopen the government, to enact a spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people, and to address the devastating Republican health care crisis that has caused extraordinary harm on people all across the country, in rural America, working class America, urban America, small town America, the heartland of America, and black and brown communities throughout America. The Republican health care crisis is devastating, the likes of which no one has ever seen. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history. A possible $536 billion cut to Medicare because of the one big ugly bill, if Congress doesn't act by the end of the year. Tens of millions of Americans are about to experience dramatically increased premium, co-pays, and deductibles because of the Republican unwillingness to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics are closing all across the country, including in rural America, because of what Republicans have done and the health care crisis they have triggered through their cruel actions throughout this year. Republicans have even canceled medical research in the United States of America, even as it relates to children who are battling cancer. The Republican health care crisis is immoral in nature, and Democrats are fighting hard to reverse it. Cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care on behalf of the American people. It's now my honor to yield to the whip, Catherine Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We are so grateful for all that you have done and putting the American people's voice into this debate. And I've had one question from my Republican House colleagues this week. Where the heck are you? Where the heck are you? You've cut people's health care. You're giving their hard-earned tax dollars to billionaires in the form of tax breaks, and then you don't even show up to defend your own policies, your own bills. Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise are both from Louisiana. Most children in Louisiana are on Medicaid. 64% of all births in Louisiana are paid for by Medicaid. 74% of nursing home residents in Louisiana are on Medicaid. Yet Republicans are willing to shut down government, refusing to even show up for work this week because they want to cut Medicaid by $1 trillion, because they want to defund health care for children and seniors and pregnant women, because they want to pay for billionaire tax cuts. Well, Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise can fight for the billionaires. They can double down, if they so choose, on their lie about who we're fighting for, But we know who we're fighting for, and so do the American people. Democrats are fighting for families, families in Louisiana, families in Massachusetts. We're fighting for American families in every corner of this country. We're fighting for a child's right to go to the doctor, fighting for a new mom's right to have a safe delivery. We're fighting to keep millions of people from losing their insurance and keeping health premiums affordable for everybody. We're here to do our job. It is long past time that Republicans join us and end this Republican shutdown. It's now my great pleasure to yield the microphone to our chairman, Pete Aguilar.
Thank you, Whip Clark. And as we're fighting, Republicans are nowhere to be seen. Our message has been very clear. Cancel your vacation, cancel the cuts, lower the cost, fix health care. That's why we're here. Donald Trump and House Republicans have shown their true colors this week. Instead of protecting health care, they're ripping it away. 15 million people at risk of losing their health care coverage. And while we're here trying to keep the government open, the guidance from our colleagues on the other side, Lisa McClain, my counterpart, the chair of the Republican conference, instructs their members, don't talk about health care. That is their message. So while we're fighting for health care, we're fighting to keep this government open. The guidance from the GOP has been very clear. Don't talk about these issues because they know the American people are with us. Democrats have been at the negotiating table for months, and we want to work in a bipartisan way. We've always wanted to work in a bipartisan way to solve these issues. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. They own this crisis. They own this shutdown. And instead, they want to use people as political pawns. Russ Vought wants to lay people off. He wants to fire people. He wants to use this shutdown to carry out the agenda that he has wanted all along. It's shameful and it's wrong. Republicans will do everything in our power to fix this Republican mess, to provide health care to people, and to ensure that the American people aren't left out in the cold, because it's the right thing to do. Leader Jeffries.
Thank you, Pete. Questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. Two quick questions for you. One, I want to get your reaction to Russ Vought announcing this $18 billion hold on infrastructure projects in New York City. Do you think you're personally being targeted?
The Trump administration is targeting the jobs, thousands of jobs, of hard-working Americans, working-class Americans, and blue-collar Americans who are going to lose the ability to work at the 2nd Avenue subway site or at the other project that has been canceled related to the Cross Harbor Tunnel. That's consistent with what the Trump administration has consistently done throughout their time in office. Lose jobs, cause economic pain and hardship for the American people. It's shameful, but it's very consistent with the Trump administration's track record of failing on the economy and targeting working class Americans.
And then just one quick follow-up, just what's happening on the Senate side. It seems there have been some bipartisan discussions on the Senate floor where they may be discussing some type of short-term CR and trying to buy a little bit more time to work through some of these issues like the ACA. Have you been briefed on those discussions? Do you support what's happening in the other chamber?
I haven't had a conversation with Leader Schumer about any developments on the Senate floor, but House Democrats and Senate Democrats remain consistent and in lockstep in defense of the health care of the American people, and that's not going to change.
Good afternoon. Jared Golden, as you know, was the only Democrat on your side of the aisle who voted for the original CR. He just put out a statement, said that the Democratic opposition to that was, quote, driven by the demands of hardball politics, driven by left-wing groups to make a show of opposition to President Trump. That's a pretty harsh statement from one of your own members. Do you refute that?
House Democrats have consistently made clear that we will sit down with anyone at any time and any place to enter into a bipartisan agreement that makes life better for the American people. We will not support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of everyday Americans. Health care is not a partisan issue. It's not a partisan issue. It's an American issue. And when you strip away health care from everyday Americans, that impacts Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike. When you strip away health care from the American people, as Republicans have done and want to continue to do, you're impacting people in rural America, in urban America, in the heartland of America, from coast to coast, and all points in between. This is not a partisan issue. Defending access to health care that's affordable, standing up for hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health clinics, that's not partisan. That's as American as baseball, motherhood, and apple pie.
But you must disagree with Mr. Golden here.
Question?
Mr. Leader, so Russ just spoke to House Republicans on a call, says that these firings are likely to start within the next 48 hours. Also said that WIC is going to run out of money within the next week, and he just posted that $8 billion of green energy will actually be cut immediately, and it's going to affect 16 states, all of them which have either Democratic leaders or Democratic majorities in their state houses or Senate. What's your response to that?
These are all
Feeling
things
the
that
pressure?
These are all things that the Trump administration has been doing since January 20th. The mass firings of federal workers, Trump administration has been engaging in this since January 20th. Targeting the clean energy economy, Republicans have been doing that since January 20th and assaulted the clean energy economy and the creation of good-paying American jobs in their one big, ugly bill. Trump administration has been killing jobs. This is a job-killing administration. Job creation is down, but you know what's up? Costs. They promised to lower costs on day one. Costs aren't going down. Costs are going up. Inflation is going up under the Trump administration. And one of the reasons why Democrats are fighting hard at this moment is because unless we extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, more than 20 million Americans in a matter of days are about to experience the reality of dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles. Many of them will experience medical bankruptcy as a result. That's why Democrats are fighting hard on behalf of everyday Americans. I'll yield to Catherine to talk about the WIC issue. But in every other shutdown that Republicans have caused, including in the 35-day shutdown that Donald Trump presided over in 2018 and 2019, funding for women, infants, and children, their health, their nutrition, and their well-being was maintained. It was maintained. In every other shutdown, the reason why the Trump administration is threatening now to cut funding for women, infants, and children is because they can't stand that program. They're on the side of their billionaire buddies. They've been running the largest pay-to-play scheme in American history. And Exhibit A of that was their one big ugly bill, which is now law. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history. And they stole food from the mouths of hungry children, women, veterans, and seniors, and all of this was done to provide massive tax breaks to their billionaire donors. We're fighting for the health care of the American people. They're fighting for their billionaire donors, their friends and family plan, which has been all about enriching the lifestyles of the rich and shameless from the very beginning of the Trump administration. So all this talk that we see right now, as if it has anything to do with the shutdown that Republicans have caused? No, it's their ideology. Cruelty is the point when it comes to the Republican Party.
Are they really expecting us to believe that the strategy that they are employing, that they're already making life in this country for working Americans harder and more expensive, that the answer is you shut down government and make life harder and more expensive? That is insane. But that is the argument that they're putting out there. And we just have to base this in reality and facts. They want to talk now about the WIC program. You want to talk now about pregnant women and newborns when 40% of births in this country are covered by Medicaid. You want to talk They want to say to pregnant women who in a third of the counties, because of their policies, no longer have access to OBGYNs, no longer have access to safe prenatal care and delivery. Now we care about you? Women of America understand exactly how they feel about us and our children. The moms that I've been talking to are so scared they may not be able to get the Medicaid funding they need. We heard from Teresa yesterday, who talked about her 2 autistic sons. She's a single mom. She had to quit her job in order to care for them full time. Without Medicaid, she has no idea what she will do. And these stories are repeated over and over in my own district. A young adult named Sydney, her mom wrote to me and said she has such profound disabilities, but Medicaid is connecting her to the world through cochlear implants, through medication, for medication that she needs not only to survive, but to have some connection, which she has found through what she has been able to restore of her hearing to music. Without Medicaid, there is no plan B for these moms and for their children. So you can save it. You can save it, Speaker Johnson, that now you are coming in and that you care about feeding hungry children, that you care that they have what they need for preventative health care, that you care about pregnant women and that they can have a safe and healthy delivery for their children. Spare us.
I wanted to get your response to something Speaker Johnson said on a local radio show in Louisiana. He said the shutdown gives Republicans an opportunity to eliminate bloated, unnecessary federal programs that they'd like to vote down but don't have the votes in the Senate. Quote, very harm to real Americans, but ultimately could be a benefit to the country for taxpayers if in this process we can get rid of some of the government fat. What's your response to the Speaker?
Everything that Donald Trump has said about the government shutting down, everything that Mike Johnson has said about the government shutting down, everything that the Trump administration has said about the government shutting down confirms the fact that Republicans are delighted to have shut down the government. Why? Because they want to continue to hurt everyday Americans. They want to continue to hurt children and families and women and hard-working American taxpayers. And certainly they want to continue to hurt civil servants who in many cases have served this country well, including in uniform, for decades. And the Trump administration and Mike Johnson and Donald Trump could care less because cruelty is the point for them, and it's all about rewarding their billionaire donors in every way possible. Democrats are holding firm because we're standing up for the health care of everyday Americans. We're going to do that today. We're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to do that this week. We're going to do that next week. We're going to do that until this issue is resolved and we address the Republican health care crisis because it's crushing the American people.
There were 3 Senate Democrats who voted last night and today for the Republican continuing resolution. Are you confident in Leader Schumer's ability to hold back his caucus from voting for this?
Yes. You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We've neither said looking to budget at the moment. How long do you reckon this shutdown will go on?
We're here in Washington, D.C. The House Democratic leader, the whip, the chair of the caucus. We've been here all week. Republicans are missing in action, nowhere to be found, on vacation, scattered across the country and the world, spewing lies and articulating the Democratic position, but they don't even have the guts to be on Capitol Hill and debate us face to face. They don't even have the guts to do that because they know there's no merit to the Republican position. And it's one of the reasons why, subsequent to that White House meeting, it's been radio silence from the Republicans.
Do you think this will go longer than the previous shutdown, though?
I think all of us, we're here, certainly Catherine and I, were here for the shutdown that took place in 2013. It was a 14-day government shutdown until Republicans finally came to their senses that they did not have public support for the cruelty they were inflicting on the American people, and then engaged in an unconditional surrender. Donald Trump presided over a 35-day government shutdown. All of us were here at the time, just entering into Democratic leadership. And then finally, Republicans realized the insanity of their position, and after 35 days, the government was reopened, and they engaged in an unconditional surrender. At this particular time, what we're fighting for is to protect the health care of the American people, which has been under relentless assault. These aren't facts and figures. This is about real Americans who've already been hurt by the relentless Republican assault on their health care. And now they're asking Democrats to participate in doing more damage to the quality of life of everyday Americans. And we're not interested. Just like not a single Democrat voted for the one big ugly bill that enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, Democrats will not participate in the Republican effort to continue to gut the health care of the American people. Vice President Vance says he wants to have a conversation. We're ready to have a conversation with any high-level member of the Trump administration. They just have to be prepared to act in good faith. Not to talk about it, but to be about it, which means canceling the cuts, lowering the costs, saving the health care of the American people. Let me let Pete Aguilar get in.
The American people are focused on this. They support our efforts to protect their health care funding. While J.D. Vance continues to spew lies, while Republicans are scattered across the country, we're here. As the leader mentioned, we're here ready to negotiate, ready to discuss and debate, how we get out of this shutdown. This is a Republican-led shutdown, all because they have an inability to deal with the healthcare crisis and the affordability crisis that Americans are going through. That's what this is about. And the American people are supportive of this, and it's a shame that they continue to use every lever they can to extract pain. But to your question, Nicole, infrastructure jobs being affected, thousands of people potentially laid off. I'm guessing a lot of those people might live in New Jersey too. A lot of those workers who could be laid off. And folks in New Jersey will have a choice in 30 days. Do they want someone running for governor who supports Donald Trump, who supports delaying these infrastructure projects, or do they not? Those are some choices that employees will have to make and that working families will have to make. And I trust that they're going to make the right decision.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. The Supreme Court last week greenlit Trump's pocket rescissions. How do you approach negotiations, not just now, but in the appropriations process overall, when the executive has essentially permission to impound the funds that Congress is appropriating?
It's a very important question, and the appropriations effort is being led in an incredible way on our side by Rosa DeLauro. partnering with Patty Murray on the Senate side. And House and Senate Democrats have been clear, including in our conversation with President Trump on Monday, that we want to reach an agreement in good faith to make sure that the government is funded and that we do it in a way that lifts up the quality of life for the American people. But we also have to make sure that if we reach an agreement that has bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate, is signed into law by President Trump, that the administration can't then come behind that agreement and in a partisan way undo funding for programs and for support that matters to the American people. And we've articulated that to them very clearly, and also laid out that in the Democratic continuing resolution that would keep the government open for 30 days, that resolution can be passed right now. The reason why Republicans consistently have voted it down is because the Democratic spending bill actually supports the health care of the American people, and Republicans are consistently voting to undermine the health care of the American people.
This
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
This is just the first day of the shutdown, but I'm curious how you're thinking about its impact on the midterms.
We are not thinking about its impact on the midterm elections.
How much of this is about showing not just your voters, but the public, that you guys are willing to stand up to President Trump, the administration, and the sort of abnormalities of his governance versus just the narrow demands about ACA subsidies and Medicaid funding?
I would disagree with the premise of that question. The health care of the American people is not a narrow demand. It's central to their quality of life. Mike Johnson in the Oval Office meeting kept saying that health care is an extraneous issue. And I had to make clear, excuse me, the health care of the American people is not an extraneous issue. It's central to their quality of life. Central to their quality of life. Children, older Americans, people with disabilities or chronic illnesses can die. Here in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, in the absence of everyday Americans having access to the health care that they need and deserve. The health care of the American people is central. Now, there are a lot of other challenges that we have to confront with the Trump administration, including, of course, its assault on the economy and the failure of Donald Trump and Republicans to actually lower the high cost of living. But that cost of living challenge is also central to the fight that we are having right now on Capitol Hill. Because healthcare premiums, copays, and deductibles are about to dramatically increase for tens of millions of Americans of every race and every region and every religion in this country. It's going to dramatically increase in an environment where America is already too expensive. And we can't allow that to happen. And time has run out in terms of Congress taking the steps necessary to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Republicans keep delaying and delaying and delaying. Why? Because they don't want to provide affordable and accessible and high-quality health care.
The simple notion that everybody understands that a deal is a deal. Let me explain both of these. On the healthcare side, the reconciliation bill that was passed in June, together with some other actions of the administration, particularly unilateral actions of Secretary Kennedy and the president in withdrawing healthcare funds from Virginia, and unilateral actions thrusting uncertainty into areas like vaccines, they've created a huge healthcare challenge for Virginians and for Americans. Again, not to speak for anybody other than Virginians, but I did a lot of travel around the state in April as some of these proposals were on the table. I did a lot of travel in July, a lot of travel in August, and I just did a good bit of travel last week around Virginia. And on the healthcare side, here is what my constituents are saying to me about what is now happening. The effect of the reconciliation bill in Virginia is estimated to cause about 330,000 Virginians to lose their health insurance. Our population is about 8.8 million. 330,000 people losing health insurance is not a small number. This is a big, big deal. And that number of people who lose their health insurance are essentially what I call the top layer of a 5-layer cake of consequences to these health care bills. That's consequence 1, people lose insurance. Consequence 2 is people who have insurance see their premiums go up dramatically. Premium notices are coming out from insurance companies in Virginia, and they're suggesting that premiums this year in Virginia will go up by at least 20%. Why does that happen? There's 2 reasons. The reconciliation bill that was passed by the Republicans in June phased out premium support for low and middle income people buying health insurance on the exchanges. The Republican bill extended tax cuts for the wealthiest, but phased out premium support for low and middle income people in buying health insurance. So that causes premiums to go up. And the second thing that causes premiums to go up is when you increase the number of people with no insurance, they go to the emergency room and they're not able to pay. And so providers provide treatment, but then they have to charge that off to somebody, and it tends to get charged off to people who have health insurance. And so the combined effect of ACA premium support going away and a whole lot of free care that has to be paid for by somebody causes insurance rates to increase. This is happening in Virginia. It's happening around the country. So that's the second layer of the 5-layer cake of consequences of what happens when the reconciliation bill passes. The third layer is this, and this is a really, really troubling one. Providers close down. Hospitals and clinics close down. When Medicaid is affected, particularly hospitals for whom Medicaid is a huge portion of the revenue stream coming into the hospital, find that they can't make it work. A national organization that looks at hospital fiscal soundness has put about 300 hospitals in the United States on a list of hospitals that are in danger because of the Medicaid cuts, and 6 of those hospitals are in Virginia, and they're all in rural Virginia. Rural Virginia tends to be a little bit older than the rest of Virginia and tends to have a little bit higher Medicaid population than the rest of Virginia. So the hospitals that are endangered by the reconciliation bill are rural hospitals. And it's not just hospitals that are on a list of potential closure. Within the last month, a prominent health provider in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, a rural part of our state, announced that they were closing 3 primary care clinics in small Virginia communities because of the reconciliation bill. The cuts made to Medicaid in the reconciliation bill made them realize that they could no longer keep these clinics open. So the third consequence of this reconciliation bill, we've got people losing insurance, we've got premiums going up, and now we have providers closing. The fourth consequence is pretty obvious. When providers close, people get fired. So people lose their jobs. Frontline healthcare workers who are doing good work in the communities and having people rely on them, they lose their jobs. That's consequence 4. And then consequence 5 is one that I know well as a former mayor and governor, and I kind of call it the loss of your future. It's one thing to lose your health insurance, and it's one thing to pay more, and it's one thing to lose your provider, and it's one thing to lose your job. But if you are a mayor or a chairman of a county board of supervisors or a governor for that matter, and you're trying to encourage economic development, a new business to move into a part of the state, or a business that is in a part of the state to expand, a question you're going to get asked is, tell me about the healthcare network in this community. I may be moving executives here. I'm going to be trying to hire people here. And if you have to look them in the eye and say, we used to have a hospital, but we don't now, Or we had primary clinics that have closed down, and now you have to drive farther to get primary medical care. I can tell you, I have been in economic development discussions with businesses over the course of my 31 years in public life and seen the lights just go out in their eye. You know, you've just told me something that has convinced me I may not know where I'm going, but I know where I'm not going. And one of the quickest things you can do to turn that light off is to make a prospect worried about whether the employees and executives and their families will have access to good health care. And so on the health care piece of this, Mr. President, what Democrats are asking for by way of an alternative, not a non-negotiable, but by way of an alternative, is let's go into the changes that were made in the reconciliation bill and fix them. I have Republican colleagues who say we don't want to completely reverse them because there's some things about the ACA premium tax subsidy we don't like. We'd like to design them differently. We'd like to negotiate, and I'm completely open to that. But I do think we ought to try to fix them. And I am heartened that a number of Republican colleagues have said, you're right, we should do that. Now, Mr. President, I have said to my Republican colleagues, coming up with a fix, even if both sides want to fix, I know this is not going to be like a snap decision. There's details. You got to dot I's. You got to cross T's. You have to analyze what the downstream consequences of any changes or fix are. I know that that is a substantive discussion where the details matter, and I'm not expecting that we would all reach an agreement immediately. So on the first point, where the Democratic proposal is different than the Republican proposal, I fully expect that this would be a negotiation that would take some time, and we needn't wait to open the government until that negotiation is completely done. We should commit to the negotiation and get in the middle of it and sit around the table and figure it out. But we needn't wait. In my view, again, this is me, not the caucus, not anybody else. This is me. We needn't solve the entire problem in order to reach a position where we fund government and reopen it. We can do it over the course of a time period that I think is being discussed in this body. The second feature of the Democratic proposal that is important to reach an accord on, I believe, is a simple notion that a deal is a deal. A deal is a deal. If we reach a funding agreement, and some have characterized the Republican proposal as a clean CR, but I would actually say it's not a clean CR unless you are guaranteed that the parties will honor it. Whatever we do, if we do something for 30 days or if we do something for 45 days, I think it is only fair to ask that a deal be a deal, that Congress fully live up to it, but the White House fully live up to it as well. We've seen throughout this year already congressional deals undone by the president unilaterally. Tens of thousands of people fired. Economic development projects that had been announced and celebrated canceled. Funds to public health agencies taken back. Again and again and again, we've seen in Virginia unilateral actions taken by the president that, in our view, undo what Congress and the White House had agreed to in previous budget resolutions. And so it's not unreasonable for us to say, well, if we're going to do a short-term, CR to try to find the path to a full-year appropriations bill, we would just want an agreement during that 30 or 45 days, whatever it is, that a deal is a deal. That we not write it, agree to it, celebrate reopening government, and then have President Trump on day 2 start to fire a whole lot of people, or claw back more money from the Virginia Department of Health, or cancel more economic development projects in Virginia. Let's just say a deal is a deal. Congress will live by our piece of it, and the White House will live by its piece of it. Virginians get this. I was traveling around this weekend, and Virginians do not want government to be closed. They want it open. And they said to me, keep government open. And I said, we want to get that deal, just like you do. We want to get a deal. But if I said to Virginians, and on that deal, Congress should live up to it, right? Right. And on that deal, the president should live up to it, right? Right. People get that a deal is a deal. It's not a complicated theory of government or an argument about democracy. It's just basic fairness that when parties reach an agreement and shake hands, that both parties have to honor it. And so what I am looking for very significantly in these discussions is an agreement for the White House that whatever the short-term period is, they will not take punitive actions against my state, against the state of Indiana, against the city of New York, or against anyone, or against any particular program that is part of a congressional appropriations bill that's already in process, that they will not selectively pick out programs to attack or individuals to fire during the course of that agreement. Now, I think we have to have that longer discussion about an ultimate year-long appropriations bill about a deal is a deal. But all I'm looking for here, and all Virginians are looking for here, is that we would reach that agreement during the pendency of some short-term CR as we try to negotiate a full-year agreement. We can do this. We can do this. We ought to do it. For a reason of fiscal conservatism, during the last shutdown in 2018, 2019, I was able to sort of strategically put a bill on the floor on a day much like today, a Thursday during a shutdown, and get colleagues to unanimously agree with the principle that in the event of any shutdown, federal employees would get back pay. It used to be in the old days, if there was a shutdown, you had to fight about back pay after, but now there's a back pay guarantee. When there is a shutdown, people are guaranteed back pay. And so that makes shutdowns really foolish. Like, you're going to shut down, you're going to lock people out of their office, you're going to tell them they can't do the work, and then you're going to write them a paycheck anyway. The fiscally conservative answer when there is a back pay guarantee is to end this quickly so people can go back in their office and serve their fellow Americans. The fact that we, I believe, have narrowed the point of division down to, can we find a path forward to negotiate healthcare fixes even if we don't agree on all the details right now? And can we reach an agreement that a deal is a deal, which is a reasonable request? I believe those are the two issues that are on the table, and they are issues that we are eminently capable of solving, and solving very soon. And I'm going to do everything I can with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we do. And with that, Mr. President, I thank you and I yield the floor.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe every senator knows and agrees that our constituents are concerned about the cost of health care. Just this morning, I heard some of my Republican colleagues also talking about health care affordability. The difference is, I think our Democratic side of the aisle wants to do something about it now. We want to fix one of the biggest health insurance spikes that we are going to see locked in 2026 in just a few weeks. We want to do everything we can to stop that. We know that when you kick Americans off of their health insurance, it hurts all Americans. Democrats know that a vague promise to fix it in the future doesn't help us solve the problems of health care delivery today. And we know that the problem is worse than we even imagined just a few weeks ago. Yesterday, the Kaiser Family Foundation released a new report on how expensive the premiums, which the ACA expiration, the Affordable Care Act expiration of those premiums may cost American families. The answer is, it's going to hurt a lot. The new report that found that out-of-pocket premiums for a single person would more than double on average next year if the enhanced premium tax credits expire. That is, we've had insurance commissioners and various offices across various states trying to make guesstimates about this, but increasing from $880 a year to $1,900 a year in 2026 just shows you how dramatic that situation could be for American families. These are families who will have to shoulder these unnecessary increases. They will be on top of all the other inflationary issues that they're dealing with now, issues like household goods, gas prices, electricity, housing, groceries, and now we want to throw at them healthcare costs. We're very clear on our side of the aisle. We want the maximum amount of people to get health insurance, drive down uncompensated care, drive down everybody's cost, and deliver good health care for our citizens. Since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the uninsured rate was cut in half from almost 16%, roughly 15.7, I think, percent in 2010, down to an all-time low of 7%, 7.8% in 2023. So the result is not just healthy Americans having their costs decreased by taking uncompensated care out of the system. It's remarkable progress towards getting everyone covered and having net savings for everybody. We know that the current majority on the other side of the aisle, they're no fan of the Affordable Care Act. They're no fan even of universal coverage. If you can imagine, we're not even being prescriptive. We just say we want to see universal coverage. We want everybody to have health insurance. Not only do they not agree with that, they have tried to repeal or weaken the Affordable Care Act 50 times in the past decade. 50 times they've gone after the Affordable Care Act, and they have failed. One time, thanks to the courage of the late Senator John McCain and two of my other colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the last significant threat to our healthcare system was defeated in 2017. Maybe some people here still working on the floor remember that dramatic moment. But now, the passage of this Budget Reconciliation Act in July, Republicans are trying to reverse the progress of the Affordable Care Act. Congratulations, you're having an effect. You're taking that act and health care out of the system. You may be trying to do it in a sneak attack. You may be trying to do it in, a vague way, but we are on to the fact that you are trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and you're trying to get rid of the ability for Americans to get affordable insurance coverage. So what now? What are we going to do to prevent rural hospitals from closing? Everyone knows that $50 billion in your slush fund that was part of the reconciliation bill is not enough to save rural hospitals. Even if he uses it, even if the president would use it just on so-called red states, it's not enough. And now you are going to say that 15 million Americans who no longer have the Affordable Care Act, marketplace plans, or the Medicaid coverage that was stripped out of the healthcare system, we're not going to have that. So you have no ideas on how you are going to help keep people insured or keep these hospitals operating. So instead of meaningful negotiations, my colleagues have decided they don't want to tell us what their ideas are to deal with the current crisis. It is not a next year problem. It is a today problem. So instead of using jurisdictional powers like the Finance Committee, they could have come up with a solution. They could have come up with a meeting today. Instead, they were having a hearing on cryptocurrency. If you thought this issue was so important, why didn't you have a hearing today on how to make health insurance more affordable for the American people? Even if you didn't want to address this particular idea, how is it that you want to have a meeting on cryptocurrency or give tax breaks to oil companies, but you don't want to deal with the health insurance problems of the American people? So instead of working with their counterparts or the House of Representatives, oh wait, the House of Representatives, they're not even here. They're not even here. And yet we're in this situation. So who are you neglecting? You're neglecting your constituents. You're neglecting 5 million Americans, including 80,000 Washingtonians, who are not going to be able to have affordable insurance by the end of this year. They will have to make a decision in November and December, but we already know from projections 80,000 of them will make a decision because they just simply can't afford it. Back to those numbers that were on the chart earlier. When you look at households and incomes, you know, somebody might say, oh, well, somebody might be able to afford $840,000. Well, not if you're a family of four on $40,000. You're not going to afford that if you're on $75,000 of income, and now you're going to pay $368,000 more, or even $90,000 of income. I got news for people. Seattle is one of the most expensive places in the country to live. And coming up with now all of a sudden $3,000 more for health insurance that you didn't think you were going to have to pay, people are going to make the wrong decisions. God forbid that these people get sick or have a condition that is really life-threatening. And who's going to be responsible for taking this out of the system? Because people don't want to come up with a solution today. It is not that hard. We can extend these tax credits. We can have affordable health insurance in the market. We can talk as an organization of people who, by the way, Finance Committee is charged with looking at this issue and discussing it. That's why we fought so hard in the Affordable Care Act for something called the Basic Health Program, which covered people under the 200% of the federal poverty line and provided more important health insurance. But right now, we need to act. We need to say to families who are going to be threatened by this that we can work together and we have a plan. And our plan is going to be able to be implemented immediately. Immediately. What is more important than having millions of Americans lose their health insurance and then basically say, we don't really care about this when we already are teetering on so much inflation, so much affordability issues, so much of people struggling. And if people think we really, really recovered from a post-COVID era, we haven't. People are still struggling with the aftermath and the effects of that. And now we're basically saying we're going to add to your insurance. So, as I did a few days ago here on the Senate floor, I came and talked about how states are now putting these numbers out, a lot of states. When I found this out this summer, I did many events across the state of Washington trying to bring awareness to the public about this. And I found out that some states were really trying to hide the ball. Like they literally didn't want to tell people these costs were going up. Maybe they thought they were going to wait until after the enrollment period opened where there was nothing you can do much past that. But these states are seeing astronomical costs for health insurance. The state of Texas, a 39% increase. Arizona, a 48.95% increase. So somehow these numbers were not available to the broader public, and we published a report last week making sure that the biggest insurers in that state, and we were projecting what the state's insurance commissioner or other groups and organizations were saying that this increase is. And now the Kaiser Foundation is putting an even brighter light on what those numbers are, saying that probably that most people will just see an actual doubling of their premiums. So how can it be okay to, and even if you thought, well, you know, okay, 5 million Americans, they're just going to be shortchanged, no problem. It's not that. It's when those people don't have health insurance, it affects the whole system. It takes that progress we made in uncompensated care, driving it down from 16 or so percent, 15 to 16%, down to 7%, and it means that you are not raising the costs on the entire system by seeing a bunch of people with uncompensated care. We did this to cover citizens because it was the smart thing to do. And my colleagues should just come to the table and say, we agree, we need to fix this now. We agree that an open enrollment period that starts as early as October 15th in one or two states and starts for everybody November 15th is on us now. And if we don't send the right signal, this is the catastrophe that's going to happen for people. and that we really do care about affordable health insurance. At a time when we already have increases in, as I said, a lot of household items, now is not the time to put health care on the list and crush families with this extra burden. Let's sit down and get this done. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I am coming to the floor today as we find ourselves in the middle of the Schumer shutdown. And this is a time where, indeed, instead of being in the Schumer shutdown and having these shenanigans taking place, we should be in the middle of working hard for the American people. If we were not in this shutdown and our attention focused on that, we could be working our way through the NDAA, our National Defense Authorization Act, and we could be passing our appropriation bills through regular order. But what we know, Mr. President, is this is something that the minority leader has been working on for weeks. It's what he wanted. He thinks that it is going to benefit the Democratic members of this chamber. And I just really think he is sorely mistaken on this, because the measure, the continuing resolution in front of us, is a clean CR, which means it is funding that is going to continue at levels where they were for a period of about 7 weeks while we finish exercising our due diligence and passing the appropriations bills. Now, this is something that this shutdown didn't have to happen. But as I said, it is something that appears to have been in the works and something that was really desired by those on the left. We have heard, of course, that the minority leader is not wanting to face opposition from the left there in New York. And because of that, of course, what we're seeing is our nation's business has come to a halt. Now, last night, and then again today, all but 3 of the members of the Democratic Conference voted against a stopgap funding measure, our clean CR, that would have kept this government running through November 21st. And keeping the spending at current levels, this measure would have given us the time we need to be working on these appropriations bills. It would have kept us moving forward and keep us from wasting time. One of the things, Mr. President, I think is so important is shutdowns are expensive. And this is something that ends up costing us money every time we do it. And of course, we have quite a bit of national debt. Now, when we talk about completing our appropriations bills and setting our spending limits for the year and fulfilling that budget document, that portion, we have our budget document, then we move to our appropriations bills. Well, Senator Collins of Maine, who has led the Appropriations Committee, has done an outstanding job working with Republicans and Democrats on that committee, building out this appropriations process, making certain that bills moved out of the Appropriations Committee and that they are making their way to the floor. Now, one of the things that is so interesting, 8 of the 12 bills that came out of the Appropriations Committee came out with broad bipartisan support. So if you've got measures that are coming out on broad bipartisan support, why would you not move them to the floor? Why would you not want to finish out this appropriations process? And of course, it should have been finished by September 30th. It was not finished by then. So we are hopeful that by November 21st, this process can be complete and that we will be moving from a Biden budget to a Trump and Republican budget, which, by the way, is what the American people voted for when they gave a mandate to President Donald Trump on November 5th. Now, I mentioned the 12 bills. 8 of the 12 have come out with bipartisan support. 3 of those bills, our agriculture, our ledge branch, and our Milcon VA have already passed off the floor, and they did so with wide bipartisan votes. This is something that, yes, indeed, we need to make certain that we continue to push these bills. Now, by passing these approach bills, we are ensuring that we get onto the budget the American people voted for. Well, this is not what our colleagues across the aisle are saying they wanted. They don't want the clean CR. They're not wanting to move forward on these bills. Instead, their measure for keeping the government open and running is holding government basically hostage, if you will, for $1.5 trillion in additional spending. $1.5 trillion. Our national debt is north of $37 trillion. It's climbing. And of course, adding another $1.5 trillion for a few weeks is really irresponsible. In this, they're basically trying to undo what we did, the steps and the progress that we made when we did the big, beautiful bill, which is truly a bill for hard-working Americans. So I would encourage my colleagues across the aisle, it is time to come to the table. It is time to pass the stopgap measure, the clean CR. And I would remind my friends that since last year, they have voted for these funding levels 5 times. So let's come together, let's get this passed, let's get back on track to pass these appropriations bills. Let's keep the federal government open and working. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Ms. Alsop-Brooks.
Mr. President,
Republican Leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the Senate resume legislative session and be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have 3 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
And Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 12 noon on Thursday, October the 2nd, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved today at the morning hour be deemed expired. The time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. Morning business be closed. And the Senate proceed to executive session and resume consideration of SRS 412 post-closure. Finally, that all time during adjournment and leader remarks count post-closure on the resolution.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until noon tomorrow.